And thank you all for attending our webinar. Again, we are the Native Peoples Wildlife Management Working Group, a part of the Wildlife Society, and myself, Avery, and Daniel are board members. My name is Nadir Mitchell. Yat'e Shay Nadir Mitchell Yanishya. Nakai Dene and Nishle, Bilagana Bashichin. Totsoni Dashe, Bilagana Dashnala. So I just introduced myself in the Navajo language. I'm Navajo. I am a board member for the Native Peoples Wildlife Management Working Group, and I currently work for Watershed Management Group. We are a water stewardship nonprofit in the Tucson, Arizona area, and I do a lot of cool beaver work. And we will pass it on to Avery to introduce themselves.
Yeah, Osio Avery Dawado Aya Chichilaji. Hello, everyone. My name is Avery. I'm a citizen of the Cherokee Nation of Oklahoma. I'm currently a veterinary student at the University of Georgia. I'm kind of tracking wildlife medicine and conservation medicine. And I am the chair-elect, soon to become chair, of the working group. And I will pass it over to Daniel next.
Thank you, Avery. Hi, everyone. I'm Daniel Bird. I'm from Santo Domingo, Pueblo, or Kiwa, Pueblo, located in central New Mexico. That's where I grew up and um, currently a PhD candidate at the University of Montana. My research is in a partnership with the Blackfeet tribe, the Blackfeet Fish and Wildlife Department, and we are conducting an elk study in partnership with Glacier National Park as well. During my master's program, I also partnered with a tribe, the Pueblo of Santa Ana, and we conducted research on mule deer out of New Mexico. Thank you all. Appreciate you all being here.
Yeah, so after introducing ourselves, we will get right into our webinar. So we will be talking about, we'll be talking about a little bit about our working group. So hopefully you all know now, we have a working group within the Wildlife Society, specifically regarding Native peoples wildlife management. So this working group consists of non-tribal members and also tribal members who have an interest in that wildlife management and stewardship, working with tribes or being tribal members. And we were founded in 1998 and with over 200 members representing Indigenous peoples across the United States and Canada. Again, we have members who work closely with tribes, but we also have members who are tribal members who may be doing other wonderful work. And as a working group, we work to centralize resources and represent indigenous voices in wildlife management. And we have two notable programs, and that is the Native Student Professional Development Program, which I myself have participated in previously. It's a wonderful program where we bring in young wildlife professionals in school who want to gain more practical knowledge by attending the Wildlife Society conference, the national conference. So because I participated in this program, I got involved with the Wildlife Society in this working group, and now I'm a board member of this working group, and now I'm here presenting to you all. So again, it is a very awesome program to be a part of. And I myself have also participated in the Native American Research Assistantship Program, where I was working with Dr. Sarah Hoagland over the summer about, I think, 2 years ago or maybe 1 year ago. So that was also another awesome professional development program that I myself have participated in. So that's a little bit about our working group. So we have some goals for this webinar. Here are those goals, and that is for us to provide information for you to understand principles for respectful tribal engagement. And we will also be participating in a scenario-based discussion to apply lessons learned. And hopefully you all will leave with concrete steps to build equitable partnerships. But again, this is a 1 hour presentation, and it definitely takes more time to build those relationships, which we will be talking about. And now I'll hand it off to Avery.
Yeah, thank you, Nadira. So, if one of you doesn't mind sharing this resource in the chat for everyone, we've been working hard on a best practices guide that kind of highlights some of the biggest takeaways, and we're going to touch on those today. That's kind of my plan before we kind of work through a scenario, a mock scenario. But it really is kind of just a guide and a starting point and a reference. Like Nadira said, it's not a super exhaustive how-to, but it really kind of covers some of the really big topics, things like reciprocity and respect and relational data, and how those things interplay when working with tribes and indigenous peoples. And so we've kind of come together as a working group and spent some time building this out. It's by no means perfect, but we do have it linked on the website for now for you guys to be able to share and download, to keep and reference. So I will kind of keep chugging along here with some of our biggest principles. So one principle we really want to highlight today, as a working group, is the idea of when working with tribes, it definitely comes down to mutual respect and trust. So we often see, this idea of coming in, it's been coined as kind of parachute research, is a term that's used frequently, where the idea is coming into a community that you're not familiar with, haven't been there for very long, don't know people working there, and are, being very extractive in the ways that you're obtaining data and the ways that you are going about conducting things. So it really kind of dismisses this whole concept of trust and this idea of mutual respect. And so I kind of have on here, respect is shown through consistent, transparent actions. So we like to say, it's definitely a relational ideology, working with tribes, understanding how they go about things, how they're doing things, what things matter to them and what things don't. And I think that that's really important at setting a foundation for engaging and having a successful project on both sides of the aisle. And so going off that, long-term relationships matter more than single projects. So really trying to embed yourself in a community, understand, how you can benefit that community and how that community can in turn benefit you. This idea of being there, being present, building this trust, building this respect to kind of lay this foundation for a really important project. And I have on here the final bullet point just about how listening is just as important as speaking. This is something my indigenous grandmother, used frequently, and you may have heard it yourself, right? But you have two ears and one mouth, so it's really important to listen more than you speak and more than you contribute. And so taking, that into your approach and how you're engaging with the community really from the start. And again, whether you're just starting to build this relationship or this is something that, maybe you've been working with a community for quite a while and now you're hoping to pivot into a new direction or kind of accomplish some new goals or perhaps even transition, right? We see, at least I see this question a lot of like so and so's been with the community for a long time, but now they're retiring. Someone else is coming on faculty. What's the best process to go about that? And I think going back to that idea of establishing those relationships, and focusing on that listening more than speaking is key. So our next really big idea that kind of goes into any sort of engagement with tribes is the idea of free, prior, and informed consent. You'll hear this term a lot. It was coined at the UN a few years ago, as a means of engaging with indigenous peoples on a global scale. But really, it's pretty self-explanatory. It's the idea that, there's this concept of consent that's required before research begins. And then that consent should be free. So it shouldn't cost anything, whether that's actual monetary cost, the cost of time. There's lots of different factors and interpretations there. Prior, right? So you need to be having these conversations early, before you are necessarily engaging in the work in the community. These are great conversations to be having during that reciprocity and relational building phase, so to speak. And lastly, informed, right? So we a lot of times see projects, and historically there have been a lot of projects that do attempt to offer consent, but it's not super informed. There's not a lot of, things laid out and terms laid out of what exactly is going to be done. So going off that, fully informed of risks, benefits, and outcomes, I think that's super important. Yes, understand that you want to partner with the community and that this is, something that you want to see through, or you likely wouldn't be asking. But I think it's really important to still discuss, the risks of the work and what's, might and could go wrong. Because I think really when you have that element of transparency, you're going to be welcomed a lot more and much more well received, even if you're acknowledging those risks. Next, again, yeah, freely given with the right to say no. This is really big, and something that we definitely don't see a lot, and not enough of is yes, you can speak with tribes and with tribal leaders and discuss projects, but understand that at the end of the day, that there is the right to say no, and you have to be able to move past that and continue to work on that relationship, to be able to achieve the goals that you have in your project and that best work with the tribe. So I think that, keeping that in the back of your mind, that it may not play out exactly as you envision. And that is what makes all this so challenging, right? Because on the Western side of things, very time focused, lots of deadlines, money that has to be spent a certain time in a certain way. And so it makes it really challenging whenever you hit these setbacks. But I feel like as we move more and more towards free, prior, and informed consent, are seeing more and more grants, and funding sources that understand when working with Indigenous people that timelines may not always, hold true as they were in the grant application. So keep that in mind. And lastly, I have on here that, it's an ongoing process. So consent can be revisited at any stage. If things start to go in a way that the tribe was not necessarily, hoping for, or priorities have changed, I think it's really important to remind them from the beginning that, this idea that consent can be revisited, and, we may have to pull out of this project at this time, due to X, Y, Z. And really also keeping that in the back of your mind whenever kind of from the beginning of engaging with groups. So next up, I have integrating ITEK, and I apologize for not spelling that out. That's Indigenous Traditional Ecological Knowledge. That's a new term that we're seeing a little bit more emerging. You'll also see TEK, which is just traditional ecological knowledge. But this is so important, right? And this is kind of the foundation of really working with any tribe, and a lot of what we do with the working group, and lots of what our members do is this idea of, bridging eyes of seeing. I have an image on here of two-eyed seeing. It's a term also that was developed to kind of represent this idea of viewing a problem or a project from both a Western kind of academic and science perspective, and also a traditional perspective, and trying to bring both of those sides together for the benefit of the entire project or problem to hopefully come up with a better solution. And so a lot of times, and as we are getting more and more popularized with this term, personally, I see it tacked on a lot of places where it doesn't belong, and not really being truly integrated. It's more just kind of there as a buzzword to sit along the side of something, and there's not a lot of engagement going on with the traditional ecological knowledge. And again, it's challenging, and that's why you'll read like on the first page of our best practices document, there's no such thing as a pan-native or a pan-indigenous solution, right? There's 475 federally recognized tribes in the United States, plenty of First Nations in Canada, and plenty more state recognized tribes. And all of us have different ways of approaching things, different culture, different ceremonies. And so it's incredibly difficult to give, a very basic, here's an XYZ approach that's going to work every time. So I think with traditional knowledge, you want to see, and from that relationship and that relational building, emphasizing how important it is for you to take that into account, to work with tribes on, you know, whatever that traditional knowledge is, to respect how that traditional knowledge is going to be shared. I don't think I have that on here, but data rights is such a big deal. There's a lot of traditional knowledge that may not be suitable for publication based on, again, cultural, ceremonial ties. It may also just not be a wise decision in general for species conservation or wildlife conservation to have, precise locations of animals and things like that. So next is it kind of informing project design methods and interpretation. So this idea of really, again, starting from the beginning, understanding how your traditional knowledge is going to be incorporated into this project, and that it should influence it as well. And that's really my dream for the future as we get to a point where, it's like we're working on moose, and, we are working on disease systems in moose. And local tribal leaders say, despite what has been known as the standard, there's no moose, south of this latitude, and there's no reason to, really put up camera traps or whatever you're doing, to do so. And you can get to a point where in your methods of your paper that is a citable source, that is something that is, viewed upon as the same idea as, completing another study a couple years prior that determined there were no moose south of that latitude. So that's my vision for kind of growing and integrating traditional knowledge into Western science. And I think we're on the climb there. Again, I have respect on here, going back to that first slide, that first bullet point, understanding that things might not be the same way as, what you're used to or what you think is going to happen, having respect for that, having, genuine curiosity and intrigue. That's another super popular question is, how far is too far? What questions, are not permissible, so to speak. I find in many tribes, if information is not willing to be shared, then it just won't be. And there's no bad feelings for asking that question and kind of asking if it's okay to understand what's going on, or if it's okay to, have a little bit of context on the ceremony or something like that. And, if the folks performing that would like to share it with you, they're more than welcome to. But if they won't, there's no ill will there, in the sense that they'll just, explain to you that not at this time. And it kind of goes back to building that relationship, and that respect as well. And then overall, right, the more you're able to integrate traditional knowledge into Western science, the more you're going to be able to support this holistic and sustainable outcome, which we all want. We're all fighting for this idea of, a cleaner, a safer, a healthier, a more biodiverse environment, right, that's able to sustain us all in the future. And so I think it's important that we approach it from both viewpoints. They both have their strengths and they both have their weaknesses, and trying to bring those together, to understand that it's going to be everyone working together, in the end, that's going to be the most successful. And so then lastly, my last big concept, we've touched on a few of these points already, this afternoon, but is just about recognizing tribal sovereignty. And so there is plethora of, legal documentation and legal differences and discrepancies and treaty rights. We won't touch on all that today. Again, it's very variable based on where you are and where you're working. So I highly encourage you to brush up on those things, whenever you plan to work or are working with an indigenous group. But understand that, across Turtle Island, tribes are sovereign nations with legal authority over their lands and resources. And so understand that and respect that, especially as an outside researcher. And that your process of research needs to respect the governance approval process and jurisdiction of tribes. Again, it's very variable on how these things are done. Many tribes now, and more so, are having departments that are dedicated to either research or to wildlife management or to natural resources, which are having more and more structured processes of approving these things. But it's not uncommon, for example, in rural communities in Alaska, to just have tribal council meetings that discuss these things, and that decide when it's going to be advantageous for the tribe and when it's not going to be. So just understanding that is also a very variable thing. I have data sovereignty on here. Again, touched on it before, but this is a ever-growing field, and the idea that tribes have rights to control and protect their information, and again, stemming from historical injustices in that regard, and how data was shared and used against tribes in the past. And so understanding that the more you approach data sovereignty and come at it from an angle of understanding and again respect and kind of clear communication about where data is going and how it's influencing policy and how you're going to be keeping and managing it, all those things are really good to discuss right at the beginning of projects, and to kind of have all that settled away, so whoever you're working with understands where data is going, how it's going to influence things, what's going to get published, what's not going to get published, all those sorts of things. And then again, kind of it all boils down to, if we're really working on this true partnership aspect, then there should truthfully be a shared decision-making power. So both sides should be able to have an influence and have a say in how things are going to happen and how, the research is going to occur. So with kind of those principles highlighted, we kind of talked about as a working group what might be best, instead of just a lecture for an hour about different things. And again, going back to how hard it is to put this into practice a lot and the challenges associated there. We really think that, learning best by doing, is a great idea. And so we kind of came up with a mock case study, of kind of proposed fish health monitoring program within a tribal community. And I need to share with you guys the thing that you can follow around, because I don't want you guys to have to read for quite so long with me here. Daniel and Nadir, do you have anything else to add before we move into this part of the meeting today?
No, I think you summarized it very well. And again, it's a learning process and it's all really based on building relationships. And that doesn't come, you know, really fast and really quickly. So again, it is solely based and primarily based on like building those relationships.
Yeah, great job, Avery. I think yeah, each of those categories are very broad still, and so you may come to a point where there's more very like detailed situations and scenarios, but I think today would be a great opportunity to just feel free to ask any one of us questions about any of the topics shared today.
Right. Hopefully everyone can see this now, and it is in the chat as well for everyone, to kind of follow along. I know it's challenging to have to listen to someone read, but I will read it out for everyone. So our kind of mock scenario for this, it says the Hudson Lake has always been central to the well-being of the West Pine River community, providing both a key nutritional resource and an anchor of cultural practice. In recent years, changes in water temperature, invasive species, and shifting spawning patterns have raised concerns about the long-term health of lake trout, the species most closely tied to the community's way of life. Responding to these challenges, faculty from Great Mountain University and Western Technical University have come together to propose the Lake Trout Health Program. The Lake Trout Health Program is outlined as a 3-year initiative designed to gather robust ecological and biological data on the Hudson Lake trout population. Plans include quarterly fish sampling, laboratory testing for common pathogens and contaminants, and the creation of a long-term data set to track population trends. Graduate students from GMU and WTU will lead much of the field and laboratory work, supported by faculty experts in fishery science, toxicology, and aquatic ecology. Results are to be compiled in annual reports and shared through community workshops, as well as in peer-reviewed scientific publications that the proposal notes will raise the visibility of both the research team and the Hudson Lake case study within national fisheries management circles. In addition to field and lab research, the program budget sets aside resources for seasonal workshops to update the West Pine River community and for hiring of a local field assistant to help with sample collection. The proposal highlights the chance for students and faculty to learn from community members' lived experiences with the lake, noting that informal discussions will be incorporated into annual program reviews. Compensation is provided for the field assistant role, while other community involvement is described as voluntary participation in workshops and advisory meetings. The program emphasizes its alignment with ongoing tribal efforts to ensure sustainable fisheries, citing the tribe's past monitoring initiatives as part of the justification for expanding academic research at Hudson Lake. However, GMU and WTU have not previously worked with the West Pine River tribe. To formalize the new relationship, the universities have drafted a memorandum of understanding that outlines the program's goals, data collection, methods, and reporting structure. The MOU is brief and heavily focused on outlining university responsibilities. The faculty plan to present the MOU to the tribe for signature at a meeting scheduled for tomorrow. You're a staff member at GMU asked to review the MOU before the team heads out. Your role is to provide feedback on whether the document supports a fair, transparent, and collaborative partnership, and if not, what improvements should be considered before the meeting. So, with that, I will get us back over here to our slideshow. We really want to kind of use this as an opportunity, like I said before, to kind of work through that scenario and what it entails and the things that they do well and the things that they don't. So really, our main overarching question is, does the lake trout health program, as currently proposed, represent a true partnership with the tribe, one built on trust, shared authority, and mutual benefit? If not, what changes would make it so? So we want you all to take a moment and kind of reflect on that, reflect on the scenario. Again, you have the copy shared in the chat. If you need to go back and reference some of the information in there, take a brief moment to kind of ponder that over, and then we will kind of discuss some questions we have to kind of facilitate discussion and again see overall what the program is like in their partnership with the tribe.
And if anyone wants to unmute their mic and speak out loud, uh, we can do that. Or I think if you raise your hand, then we can select you to respond.
Yeah, I think if you guys raise your hand, then Deer should be able to approve you to speak and to answer. So kind of my first question for the group are just, what are your first impressions of this program as proposed? Does it appear to align the values and needs of West Pine River community? Why or why not? So we'll kind of open up to that, or if you have kind of more general thoughts on this overarching question.
Okay, I see a couple of you raising your hands. Let's see if I can select you to speak.
I think John should be able to speak.
Okay. John, I believe you are unmuted now.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for that presentation. That was really well done, concise, and to the point. I appreciated the information that was presented. Um, my answer is that this program does not represent a true partnership, uh, and that's based on the fact that this MOU is going to be presented without any prior input from the tribe. And what I would have recommended is informal uh, meetings, sessions, listening sessions, if you will, with the tribe to learn about their interests, their experience, their history, and then working with the tribe to draft an MOU which represents their interest. Because right now the MOU, the way I understand it presents one-sided interests, and it should be developed collaboratively and should not be presented in final form for approval the way it's being suggested right now.
Yeah, thank you, John. I think that that's a great point, and something that I was hoping folks would catch on is just this idea of, perhaps, we kind of established that there's unlikely a relationship there already, and so it's unlikely they've really been working on this very long, maybe done a site visit or two, but all of a sudden, we're just going to have this MOU presented tomorrow. It's probably not going to be, in the best interest of the community to kind of have that sprung upon them. I'm sure you all can imagine being in a similar situation, and it's never fun if folks have a bunch of stuff for you to read all at the last minute, and you got to go through it all and figure out what's what, and there might be some changes there. So, excellent there. Does anyone else want to hop on, raise their hand, and hopefully Nadira can unmute you for kind of this overarching question, or kind of just your first impressions of the program as discussed?
Yes, we have Chantel up to speak.
Thank you. I'm mostly just echoing what John said, but just sort of, yeah, underscoring the prior and informed, and again, I think pretty much any issue that I would raise would be solved by this having been a conversation that happened in the past. So the highly problematic to present an MOU that's never been seen by the tribe before and asking for a signature on the same day with zero input. So that's all in that prior and informed. And specifically, yeah, what are the knowledge pieces that the tribe would like to gather? Can they get input into? What are the things that they already know that you don't need to do the research on, and what are the things that they would like to know that you could help collect data on? And then also things that raised my eyebrow were the publication in the peer-reviewed scientific publications, just making sure that that information is actually acceptable to be shared if they're comfortable with that. So again, John said it all, and I think it really does fall under the FPIC, free, prior, and informed consent. Just zero consultation was done in advance of this preparation. I don't think I'm bringing much new to this, though.
Yeah, no, totally correct there, and exactly. Not a lot of consultation, and so it's unlikely that the MOU as it currently stands is going to be super successful. And I really like how you touched on, this idea of what data is already collected, what's already been done that we may not need to do over again, and may be able to divert that time, those resources to something else that kind of achieves this goal, or kind of be able to consult for a new goal. So kind of spinning off of that, one of my other questions that I had was, we kind of talked about how there's not been a lot of consultation so far. So what would that consultation look like? If anyone is bold enough to kind of talk about, maybe in this situation, what, instead of going with them to the MOU tomorrow, let's say, you've advised your peers, you said, hey, I don't think we should take the MOU tomorrow. I think we should do this. What would you maybe recommend as a good next step to kind of rectify the situation, or, kind of lean more into the right direction?
Okay, I saw Cynthia's hand raised. I selected you correctly, or maybe.
Hello?
Okay, Bella, yes.
Okay. I would approach this, and I'm rather new to this, so I could be totally wrong, but I would approach this as I would suggest to my peers that we should initially reach out to them, express our concerns and the direction in which we're sort of headed vaguely, and ask if they would be willing to meet with us and discuss the project further in depth, and if it would be something they were interested in pursuing, and what terms they would bring to the table for us being allowed to pursue this endeavor with them.
Yeah, thanks, Bella. I think that that's a great option and a great idea to move forward. Is to reach out is for sure one way to kind of facilitate that conversation, exactly kind of explain, we have, some funding for lake trout, and we really want to try and help understand, why we're seeing population declines. We'd love to meet with you and chat more about it and leave it very open in that. I've also recommended to people, maybe at your particular institution, no one has worked with this group before, these tribes before, there's not a relationship there, but maybe at another institution there is. And reaching out to someone else who has done work with them before and trying to kind of build a relationship there as well, and understanding between the two of you, help them understand where you're coming from. Again, now you kind of have a little bit of a buy-in, so to speak. You have a place to start. You're not kind of coming from so far away. A bit of a relationship there as you begin to build your true relationship with the tribe to do the work. So I think that's for sure a way, is definitely still just reaching out and kind of leaving a very open door of, this is kind of what we want to do, but we very want your feedback and want to see what you need in the community. Kind of going off of that, we kind of mentioned a little bit about this already. But I'm trying to think of which question here I have lined up is best for us. I guess, what actions could your research team take throughout? So say, like, in this instance, you have reached out to the tribe now post MOU and are working, on starting this project more formally. What ways would you want to make sure are in that MOU? What are some things that, your team could take to begin to repair the trust, build more trust, and kind of building an authentic partnership? What are some ideas that folks have to kind of build that into the MOU as you get the project going?
And I had selected Eagle to talk next. If you want to add on from the
Yeah.
last question
Yeah,
or
you're
add
more
on to
than
this
welcome to
question.
completely disregard my suggested questions and share other things as well.
Amazing, because I'm still on your first question. There's just a few things that come to mind. Um, as you might be able to tell from my name, I'm also Indigenous, so I'm coming at this from two worlds. And one of the things that I think in the beginning too is that we could, if I was a corporation going into towards the tribe, I would go in and say, hey, look, you did some really good research here, and we just want to build up on that. And we just want to help you better in this study. And then start talking about, like, why did you choose these research areas? Is there anything due to research or capacity that could we help you with if there's areas that you couldn't go to, things you couldn't research, or any studies that you couldn't do due to lack of capacity? And then try to work with them to almost like add on to what they've already done. And then another thing that I was thinking about is in terms of TEK, if we get the tribe involved, definitely another thing has to be signed in terms of sharing any of the TEK in a study. And then lastly, the last thing that I have is, it says in there that you would get like somebody from the community to be assistant. I think it would be really amazing if you approach the tribe, because they've already done so much research for that assistant to come up from the tribe and be able to add more clarity and even be the leading person to help understand the area and the areas of research.
Yeah, thank you, Eagle. That was great. I totally agree, especially with your last point. And the idea is definitely exactly to help. In another way that we can benefit tribes is employing tribal members to have these things. The description also discusses how there won't necessarily be compensation outside of that single position. If folks have ideas on some ways, say your grant is very restrictive, it doesn't really allow for like honorariums or stipends for folks who are maybe just sharing knowledge or are, participating in surveys. Do folks have any ideas of other ways that benefits may be able to be shared with those individuals who are contributing time and knowledge, perhaps outside of monetary means? And again, if you have other your hand raised for other questions, you can still answer those as well.
Yeah, we got Cynthia up right now if you want to add anything.
Hey, thanks. Yeah, this is going really well. I didn't have anything on that. Really good question, Avery. But adding to what Eagle said, this is a place, and so I would, in working with something related to the land, I would go out into that space, try to have a gathering if we had access granted to us, and just have a gathering out on the actual space to learn from all the people in that environment. It's this sounded like a lot of back and forth over email and MOUs and getting things a little less formal, getting out into the place, I think is always a good way to start a conversation and get more people involved in telling part of the story.
Yeah, for sure. I totally agree, Cynthia, and I think that's oftentimes very well received by tribes and indigenous groups is whenever, going in, exactly extending past this very formal email communication and things and dropping by for a visit to, their city hall or what their building, or if they may be having a powwow that's open to folks from outside the community to come and visit, and kind of touching on my last question too, an answer I was maybe looking for was gifts. Gift giving is very big component in indigenous culture, and even as a non-indigenous person coming in, still making a gift is something that's oftentimes very well received. Whether that's food is something I often recommend, or people often get very concerned about gifts. And this kind of brings me to, in the very back of that best practices document, that best practices guide, there is an appendix about gift giving and some principles of gift giving. Again, the ideas are not pan-indigenous, but it's a baseline for you. And a lot of times I recommend folks, if you're crafty with your hands, if you know how to make things, whether those are, just objects, little crafts, whatever. Those are often very well received, and things that you can create and have poured time and energy into make very, very good gifts. So I think we will have maybe one or two questions here about our mock scenario, and then we will open up the floor to questions just in general, kind of overall about any of this stuff, and things that we can help clear up, me, Nadira, and Daniel, while we have a little bit of time. But we'll take one more question about the mock scenario, or I suppose not question, but feedback.
Gordon, you should be able to unmute yourself.
Thank you. My question is, how do you approach a tribal authority in the first place? At what level? Because tribes, I assume, have their own governance structure with leaders and uh, people underneath that leader. And at what level does one approach a tribe initially? Do we need to go to the top or work with technical staff or field staff, or just what approach is best to avoid offending the tribe?
Yeah, Gordon, that's a great question. And I think, unfortunately, don't have a super great answer for you, but I can let you know from my own experience what I personally think would be best. I oftentimes think if you have a very structured tribal government that has a lot of employees that vary in rank, they have a natural resources department or something like that, then I think it's super great to reach out to folks in the natural resources department that you're hoping to partner with. Even better if, and we've kind of touched on this today, like say you saw them publish a study on, lake trout health, and you have all this money to study lake trout health. That's a great connection. You can make that connection with them, discuss kind of that you would love to partner with them and kind of facilitate these goals that they likely already have. I think that that's fine. If you run into groups that maybe don't have such structured governments or perhaps do not have a natural resources department, then I definitely think that just kind of going, so to speak, as high as you can on the ladder that you kind of can identify and speak with, is going to be, better for your interest. Again, going in person, bringing gifts, these are all things that are generally more amiable to your cause. And again, just being very, very open and honest, understanding that maybe with that first meeting, you're not gonna, probably have everything lined out, but just kind of discussing like, about lake trout and what exactly, the community hopes to see for lake trout. Have they seen, lake trout populations declining? You'd really like to help them investigate why and see if we can come up with solutions to, protect the lake trout population. And then I think that would be a successful and proper way of doing things as well. So I think definitely if you can try and go through as close to your issue as possible, and they can redirect you as such. But if you're not having a lot of good headway there, or they don't have a natural resources department, then I don't see anything necessarily incorrect about trying to find someone on tribal council or an elder in the community or something like that, that could put you in touch with the right people or help facilitate the beginnings of that project. I think since we're kind of down to our last 10, 12 minutes, we can just kind of head over to more just kind of general questions and answers. For me, Daniel, Nadira, we can all kind of pitch in here and facilitate things about just, again, ideas or questions you have about doing all this work in general, and we can try and provide as much feedback as possible.
Yeah, one question we had in the chat was whether or not people could use some of our slide recommendations, some of the recommendations we presented with credit. How do you all feel about that, Avery and Daniel?
Yeah, that's fine with me. I'll also let you know that a lot of this stuff comes from that best practices guide. And there is a little like already a citation in there for you of how to cite that document if you'd rather do that. But yes, I'm fine with that. Any more questions in the chat, Nadira? I'm trying to pull it up here as well.
Yeah, there's a lot of questions in the chat.
Okay.
Let's see what would be. Mm. Also, we welcome new questions as well.
Yeah, I see a little bit more about gift giving. Again, the best practices guide kind of talks about gift giving right at the end. And again, it's hard to provide kind of a super specific answer to a lot of these. But my advice would just be that gifts are often very well received. It shows that you care, that you have intent when you are approaching a conversation, and that you've taken time to make these things, and respect that the time you're taking from the individual of which you are asking to discuss something with is relevant to them, and you're acknowledging that. And so I would definitely encourage. So like one of the questions is who to give the gifts to. There's no like formal, there's nothing formal you have to say. No magic words, so to speak. If it was me, I would just whoever I was hoping to have the conversation with, and that I went to go and see and talk about lake trout, I'd say, hi, so and so. Yeah, I'd love to talk more about lake trout. I brought this, like wax candle that I made at home, that I kind of collected various, plants from around my garden and helped incorporate those into wax. And I just wanted you to have this for speaking with me today, and I'm very appreciative for your time. And that's really, kind of the heart and soul of it. Again, I don't think there's anything that you necessarily have to say or have to do in specific. The idea is kind of more the intent behind the action. It's what's really going to propel you forward there. I really like Fran's question, and I'm curious Daniel and Nadira's answers on this too, but asking about if you can expand on how to best move forward when maybe you're already in the project and you realize, you know what, I haven't been doing this, maybe as well as I could have. And man, I've been there too. So understanding like, I totally should have been, thinking about this before. And that goes back to hindsight being 2020 for sure. And I would say keep a mental note of those specific things that you can change. But overall, I would definitely encourage you to speak with, the Indigenous aspect of your project, whoever is kind of helping you there and is your main contact there, and discuss how you want this project to be, more benefit sharing is really a good place to start. Like, what are some things we could still do today that would help kind of make sure that this project is going to create some long-term benefits? Maybe that's creating, having some tribal youth come and, shadow the project for a couple days, see what a career in natural resources looks like. Or it is having, a couple students help or staff members help with writing publications and getting names on publications. Unfortunately, just in Western academia, we all know how important that is and still is today. And hopefully we can transition more and more away from that. But for the time being, that's a really good way to do things. Nadir or Daniel, do you have anything else to add there from your personal experiences?
Well, I think it's also a good thing that you are realizing this. I mean, oftentimes the main issue is that people actually don't realize that they should be reaching out to tribes and community members. So I think it's already a good thing that in this situation that you are realizing that, oh, I haven't been doing what I should have been doing from the start. So I think coming with that humility and humbleness is always a great show of respect, because we're all learning, and I think that will, if you just come in that humble way, that's a good way to go about it.
Yeah, I don't think I have much more to add other than yeah, don't be afraid to say, hey, we started this project, but after attending some webinars and gaining more experience, I should have reached out sooner about this project, etc. Um, yeah, and then look at ways to include the tribe or tribal folks from there on out. I think you can be pretty creative, like Avery was talking about, getting local folks from the community, students to learn about the project. Maybe they can volunteer or become an intern on the project, or yeah, there's a lot of different creative ways I think that we can support tribes and show reciprocity.
Yeah, great. I will take Evan has a pretty good question and something I've gotten before, and that's understanding its tribe and personnel driven. Any advice on establishing a long-term relationship between tribes and organizations that see frequent staff turnover? Another really tricky one to discuss. And again, it's really hard, right? Because at that basis, and like you mentioned, Evan, it's about that relationship. And so when you're having those relationships constantly turn over, it can be super challenging. I think maybe if you know that's the case, it can sometimes be really beneficial to share that up front, perhaps with the tribe, just letting them know that, hey, our organization oftentimes, has lots of people kind of dipping their toes in things. We want you to be aware of that, and we're open to suggestions on how we can do better with making sure that transitions are smooth. I think that's for sure a big thing on the end of the organization who's having the turnover is between each person. I know it's hard. There's lots of things probably with those roles and duties, but have them try and meet the individuals in the tribe who are they are going to be working with, and you kind of do that Passover kind of in person if possible would be really beneficial. And just kind of, again, that open two-way communication and understanding that, there's probably going to be some pushback there from the tribe and things just may not be, as perfect as if you had someone in that role for, 20, 30 years. But I wouldn't let it discourage you too much, and to just keep, on top of that kind of open line of communication and being very frank about these ideas.
And then we can also, if you would also like to say your question out loud, you can raise your hand and we can unmute you as well.
Yeah, we probably have time for like one or two more questions. Um,
Okay, let's do David.
Hi, can you hear me okay?
Yes, thank you.
thank you so much for what you're doing. Really find it valuable. Right now, we're in the process, or I work for the Nez Perce Tribe Wildlife Program. We're in the process of developing a tribal condor task force for our work, and it's revolves around, helping, uh, and I guess, empower community leaders who are behind our work to have a sustaining voice despite changes in government and elections, so that there's longevity to our project, like advocacy and longevity through the community with our project. And we're just starting to develop that task force. And I'm just wondering if you have any advice or experience on how that process may relate to organizing listening gatherings to solicit feedback from the community and share information about our project, and then ask for feedback and guidance from the community.
Yeah, David, great question. And I see you're typed out one here too. And my personal recommendation would be perhaps on the proceed side of things. So maybe have your task force that is going to be working on condor restoration, kind of, somewhat form that group or form it totally, and then kind of engage in those community gatherings and kind of tweak such. I definitely think that, you have this goal of, condor, restoration. And so having that task force is going to be kind of a core component of that goal. So I would definitely, in my opinion, I would kind of then go back and have those community listening sessions and try and take that feedback into account. To me personally, it's probably unlikely that too much, that there's going to be a lot of feedback that's going to alter maybe the structure of your task force too much. There might be one or two, more individuals, or they recommend, so-and-so or XYZ kind of help sit on and listen to things on the task force. But besides that, I think that, most of their feedback is going to be in relation to, how you're operating and all those sorts of things. So.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Okay, one final question, Nadir, if you want to pick on one last person.
And also, I would like to give a shout out actually to the Native American Fish and Wildlife Society, which is a separate organization from the Wildlife Society. So they do awesome, great work as well within their own organization, helping tribal wildlife managers, researchers, building that support system. So they are also a really great resource. So definitely check out their website, check out their events, webinars as well. If you are a tribal manager, practitioner, or if you're interested, definitely just check out their website for more information. And let's see if there is another good question. I guess this is a good question. Any advice on how to make virtual meetings accessible, palatable for these groups? I assume meaning tribal communities. So that's an interesting question. I'd say like with the pandemic, a lot of tribal members have, experienced the Zoom world as well. So that is also a form of communication that a lot of people utilize, that a lot of people have meetings with as well, just like, everyday other people. So again, but I always say like in general, even when you're not even working with tribes or tribal community members, that having in-person meetings or events is always a way to go, because that's where like the real work happens. That's where, you develop those actionable items and also connect to the land. So in terms of like um, virtual meetings, again, there's like give or take, if you're like if you're in different states and if you're in the city and if they're rural, it's definitely um, hard to make that determination on should we do a virtual meeting or should we meet in person? Yes, it's also hard to determine the correct answer for that.
Yep, I totally agree, Nadira. Well, everyone, in the interest of time and kind of to respect everyone's time, we will kind of wrap up here. Just thank you very much for your participation and engagement, and your many questions. We appreciate it all. Again, just call to action. Remember to be applying these best practices in your own work and sit and think about that and how you can reference that guide as much as you'd like and share it with your colleagues and networks. It's by no means extensive or a solution to all problems, but we hope it's a good starting point. And lastly, stay connected with us for future resources and events with the working group. I should have put our email on here. Maybe I can throw it in the chat really quickly.
I'm not sure if the website has our contact info, but it has the board members on there at least.
Yeah. But our general email is, if you want to scribble it down, it's tws.npwg@gmail.com. And feel free to kind of reach out to that email and we can kind of filter through those as we have time. But yeah, we really appreciate all of your time today. And we hope that this was beneficial. So thank you.
Yeah, and then again, thank you for the great, awesome turnout. It definitely surprised us, I'd say, when we first had the idea of starting this webinar. We weren't thinking that we'd get hundreds of people, but we really appreciate you all making the effort, taking the time out of your day to join us. And so without further ado, I will end this webinar. And definitely, if your question was not answered, definitely email our working group your questions. Thank you.